outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, CEO of the Crone Law Firm. And with me today are two very special guests. As I remarked off the air, this is the first time we've done a podcast with two guests, but I think it's pretty special that Commissioner Walter Bailey and his son Taurus Bailey are joining me today. They're both partners at the Walter Bailey Law Firm, and which is, we'll just start right there. That's got to be awfully special, guys, to be able to work with your dad and work with your son.
I would agree with that. It is special. It's been a wonderful mentoring experience for sure.
And of course, needless to say, I'm enamored to have my son with me. In fact, I've got my grandson law clerking, and he just graduated from law school and has just taken the bar.
Where did he go to law school?
My alma mater, Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, very good, very good. So that's three generations of Baileys under one roof.
That's right. I believe that might be I think it is the first African-American three generations in Tennessee as far as law practice is concerned, to my knowledge. Yeah.
Walter, do you ever have trouble keeping Taurus in line, considering he's your son and your law partner? Does that ever become a problem?
Absolutely not. He's enormously independent, I should say, but respectful.
Well, good. Well, Taurus, what kind of practice do you have?
Well, with my father, Walter, I do personal injury work. We do quite a bit of premises liability. We also do some criminal defense work, not in large volume though. It's particularly take appointments. We take private practice stuff, but I do a lot of federal defense appointments. And my father did a lot of that before I started doing it. Now he has really exited that for the most part, and I do a lot of it.
Okay. Walter, what was your bread and butter through most of your career in terms of law practice?
Personal injury and some criminal defense. In my criminal defense practice, I represented everybody from serial rapists, sexual offenders, murderers, drug dealers, and even represented an Academy Award-winning actor when he was here overseeing a film being shot.
Actually, a couple of them.
Yeah, a couple of them. In fact, he put my name. He didn't. I let him get by. Those guys are cheap. I learned the hard way. I was 11. I learned the hard way. Both, I got some recompense in terms of money, but I got my name in the credits in the film that he was here shooting.
Well, Walter, you've had a distinguished career that's obviously still ongoing. What's the most memorable case you ever handled?
Tennessee versus Ghana, United States Supreme Court case involving deadly force application by law enforcement officers.
Now, Garner, that's taught in the law schools.
Yeah.
What was it like to argue in the U.S. Supreme Court? I've always wanted to do that, never had the opportunity.
I didn't argue the case. Of course, I was there sitting we could have split the argument, but I chose to let my associate go ahead and do the argument. We only had 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And but of course I was there, and of course I was lead counsel, and I generated the case issue regarding the application of deadly force by law enforcement officers which stemmed from my being outraged at the number of shootings we had back during that period in the late 70s.
Well, and that case is still very applicable today and still very relevant today. As we've seen over the last year, a lot of focus going on the use of deadly force by police officers. What's your perspective on whether or not that situation has changed over the years from the 70s to now? What do you think about all that?
Well, I think it has changed enormously because prior to Ghana, there was open season on shooting people who flee and suspected of felonious offenses. And of course, Ghana put a halt to that. And at least now you got to have some justification other than I suspect that he was a felon and shot him because otherwise in a foot race, he'd have beat me.
Well, I remember this is before, I think, the Foreman case in Minneapolis, but there was a shooting in North Carolina where the fellow got out of his car and was running away, and the police shot him. And my initial reaction to that, and I'd be interested in yours, was, in 2020 or 2019, where are you going? It's not like it was back in the day when you could just disappear off the grid. They had his car. They knew who he was. Why do you have to shoot him as he's running away? It just seems like, it just seems lazy to me.
Well, you can't be perplexed. As you and I both know, you as an attorney involved in the science of human behavior, we're fully aware of how complex it is. And there are no easy answers sometimes. I mean, why people do as they do.
That's true. And I think that's very wise, that the idea there's no easy answers. I think these days we all want to try to boil it down, whatever the controversy is, to one thing or one simple thing. And there are very few results that come from one cause. Maybe in the natural world, but not with human beings.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, Taurus, what about you? How long have you been practicing?
Since 2002, and so that's almost going on 20 years now. Graduated from law school in 2002. I've been in the law business since 1995, and I was actually a University of Memphis law student and then transferred to the National School of Law. And I was going part-time, so I take a couple of classes a semester, basically. So it was a slower pace, but I got to work during the day because I got to work with the Treasury Department for the state of Tennessee and the state of Tennessee Attorney General during the day. And then I was going to law school at night, working on the rollover cases. But remember those Ford Explorers when they were rolling over and the tires were Firestone tires were exploding and nobody could figure out why people were dying. So I was hired by the Attorney General specifically to work on that case with his Consumer Protection Division. And then I came back to Memphis. So after that, I started working with my father, Walter, and then the Public Defender's Office. Then did that part-time for 13 years. And then I started working with the city of Memphis part-time luckily as an appointee of Mayor Jim Strickland, and doing city of Memphis defense. So I've been lucky because I've got to be on both sides of the coin. I've worked a few cases of police brutality and wrongful death on behalf of the officers, but with my father's firm, I got to work. I also helped him with some cases that we actually sued, not just the city of Memphis, but some other municipalities too, including West Memphis. In fact, my brother Jay and I, when he was practicing, when he no longer practices, when he was practicing with us, we did a trial over in West Memphis on Deontay Farrow, who was shot by a West Memphis police officer. And we weren't successful in that one, unfortunately, but that was before the public was outraged and as shocked as they are with the number of shootings going on. So things were a little bit different. That was around 2012, 2011, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a great legacy. You're probably like me, Taurus. I remember when I used to be the youngest lawyer in the room, and that's happening less and less frequently these days. But 20 years can go by awfully fast, particularly in this profession, because it's so fast paced and you have so much of an opportunity to do good for people.
Yes, yeah, I agree, and that's a rewarding feeling. We don't always have the privilege of getting that feeling, but it is rewarding when you get it.
Commissioner, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your role in the civil rights movement, and just what your recollection was from those days, and why did you? Not everybody that was white or even African American decided to be vocal during those days. Why did you think that it was important to step out and be a leader for civil rights?
Well, it all stemmed from my brother and I having been at Southern University together. I was a freshman. I was a sophomore. I was down on a football scholarship, and he was a freshman. Well, it was his sophomore year when the student bus riding and the lunch counters explorations occurred. And Diama was one of the leaders at Baton Rouge in leading the sit-ins down at the downtown Baton Rouge. And he got expelled, got thrown out of college. And of course, it was an asset for him because he ended up being recruited by up east, those schools were giving scholarships to those who were expelled for that very reason. And of course, you get the bug, and once you get the bug, that's it. That bug defines of the system, and that's just it. It's intoxicating, and you just develop a behavior where you want to wave your fist at injustices. And when I got to Memphis, of course, after leaving law school, I went to law school down at Baton Rouge as well as undergrad. I came back with the first integrated law firm, which was Radnor, Sugarman, Lucas and Willis. And then I got involved with them. And that law firm was pioneering in the field of social justice and integration. I ended up being a counsel for Dr. King when the city sought an injunction to prohibit his second march. As a result of that firm getting the call to represent him on that and defend him on that injunction. And once, as I indicated, once you get that bug, once you get that, just like you, that's why you're involved in social pioneering and electoral politics and concern about community development. Once you get that bug, oh my God, it's there. There's no retreating.
Now you had elected office in Shelby County for a number of years. What was your first?
In fact, I got an award for being the longest serving Black county official in the country.
Is that right?
Chicago, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
What was the first thing you ran for?
County commission.
And did you win the first time out?
Yeah.
Well, not many people can say that. Not many people can say they won the first race. That's pretty remarkable.
And it was odd the way I won it. It was the formula. We didn't have runoffs, and there were 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats in the race, and the combined Republican vote was more than the combined Democratic vote. But as a result of 4 contenders in the race, I had the largest number of votes among the 4 of us.
Who were the other three candidates?
Donna Thurman was one, and she was destined to hang in there and help me win, because she and the other Republican, well, wasn't Republican, but it was a machine Democrat. She and the other machine Democrat, she just wouldn't get out. And as I said, her vote and the other person's vote combined were less than my vote and my Democratic opponent's vote, but I had the majority of the votes.
So were in your early part of your career, were you politically active? You're not.
Yeah, I was president of the Shelby County Democratic Club, and with Russell Sugarman and the pioneers. They didn't mind grooming and developing leadership.
Was Mr. Crump gone by the time you got involved, or was he still around?
Oh yeah. Oh no, he was.
I thought so. Yeah. Who was running the Democratic machine back then?
Running the Democratic machine. As I recall, I'm trying to think. I would say the closest person to that would have been Bill Ferris.
Yeah, I always said the difference between me and Bill Ferris was his friends would hire him to do law work. He knew how to turn all of that into money. I've never been able to figure out how to turn politics and all of that into money. But he certainly was an imposing figure for years in Democratic politics.
He was.
And he predates me a little bit. When I got involved in politics in the late 80s, he was still around, but he wasn't nearly as influential as he used to be, I suppose.
No, he was as you would want to characterize him, he was an old-fashioned political boss, but on the right side.
Yeah.
We say that with love, right? I mean, that's not we're not denigrating him. We say that with love. He was
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Taurus, what made you, you talked about you've been in and around the law business for a long time. What attracted you to the law? And you said, man, that's what I want to do. I want to be a lawyer.
That's a good question, because a lot of people will make the assumption that it was some obligation, familial obligation, but it wasn't at all. I was never pushed to do. You can't push anybody to be a brain surgeon or push somebody to be a lawyer or push somebody. They have to want to do it. You're not going to make it through school. And I got the debating bug in high school. I like debating. I like reading a lot. I read a lot. I love philosophy, and I was reading a lot of history at that time. And we didn't have a debate club, so I needed an avenue to let out this energy. And I got to college. I was actually a musician all through school. I was playing guitar and drums and bass and this and that, and I did piano, I did vocals, and I wound up trying to get a music scholarship to Berklee College of Music. And I got in, and they gave me barely any money for that first year, and I didn't want my family to be responsible to pay the expensive tuition to that Boston Music Conservatory. It was so expensive. So I had only other place I'd applied was to UT Knoxville. And so I sent my audition tape there to try to get in their jazz department, and it was lost. So when I got there, I just gave up and said, I'm just going to try something else. I didn't really know what else to do besides argue. And I didn't like math too much, so I figured, well, I'll just try the law thing. And so I got to back then they didn't have electronic sign up, of course. You had to stand in line and sign up for your classes. And I'd asked them to sign me up for pre-law. They said, there's no pre-law program here. I was a little bit stunned because they had this big law school there. And I said, well, what do I do if I want to go to law school? And then this little sophomore girl she said, well, most people just sign up for political science. I said, is there any math in it? And they said, no. I said, well, sign me up for that right there. I got my degree in political science. And then I went straight to law school.
Accuse me of being a political science major because those lines to pick up your class cards were shorter than the business.
That's right. And UT is a big science, a big STEM school. Everybody was an engineer or a veterinarian or everybody. So they didn't cater much to humanities at all. So we had like one small little building for the humanities, and that's where I spent most of my time learning that and studying Spanish. I took Spanish too. I speak fluent Spanish. I took that pretty serious too.
Very good. Commissioner, what attracted you to the law? A guy like you could have done a lot of things in social justice and business, but you looked at the law. What attracted you to the law?
You know what got me into law, oddly enough, was here again, getting back to the sit-in demonstration. When going back to Southern undergrad, when my brother was expelled, and I was such an outstanding football player, they wanted to expel me, but the coach wouldn't have it. So what he did was, so the resolution was, well, you can't come back and live on campus with other students because you're a troublemaker. But you got a football scholarship, and we want you to play ball and go on to class. So they put me out there with the married students. I mean, with the faculty, with the married faculty, in the barrack that they had out there. Here I am, a student out there living in the barrack, so I could play football and retain my student affiliation, and yet not be on campus being a troublemaker, living in the dorm, athletic dorm. So as it turns out, some of the ladies some of the female teachers said, well, he's bringing female visitors out here. So they kicked me out of there and put me over there at the law students, on the law students dormitory. So at the law student dormitory, of course, then I got, they kept encouraging and nudging me. You got a political science degree, so what are you gonna do with it? I said, well, I don't know. I can go back home and go into politics. They said, well, no, why don't you go to law school? Give it a try. Because I hadn't fathomed law school initially until I got with the law students over there at the law student dormitory. And they encouraged me, and I got such encouragement, I gave it a try, and then from then on, I took off. But that's how I got there. It was a kind of a pretzel twist.
Well, it's amazing how the Lord works. I'm a firm believer that, the Lord speaks to you through your life, and we all have plans, and then things change and opportunities come along, and it's borne a lot of fruit between you two guys. Because I, with all due respect to Taurus, I know that part of your inspiration had to be your uncle and your dad, who were both great lawyers in their own right.
Oh, sure.
Even though you may not have gotten pressure, you certainly had that example of what could be.
Yeah, my mother had gone to law school too. She did a full year and decided she wanted to continue in education. She was already an educator. She had a master's in education, but she decided she wanted to stay with education. But she completed her first year, and so I admired that education and academia was important. And I never really had a problem with that. I wasn't a great test taker, but learning was always something that I loved.
Yeah, one of my secrets that I try not to talk about too much is I really enjoyed law school. Everybody talked about how bad law school was. I love the study. I love the theory. I love talking to my classmates about, how you sit in the break room and talk about all kinds of things. And I savored those 3 years because I knew that once it was over, I was going to have to work for a living. And so I just really enjoyed that whole process. But a lot of people didn't. A lot of people, it was a means to an end, but it was harrowing for them. I don't know why I was so brain damaged to like it, but I just really loved it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
All right, Commissioner, let me ask you something, and I hesitate to ask this because I'm like a good lawyer. I never ask a question I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
When I break that rule, I get into trouble. But I have a recollection, and tell me if I'm wrong about this. I have a recollection that at one point you partially practiced law out of an RV. Is that right?
Oh, no. No, I didn't practice law out of an RV.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody told me that you had an RV and
I got an RV, but I didn't practice law out of it.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean that was your only office, but did you ever use it to visit clients or to have be able to go to clients and that sort of thing? Maybe I just dreamed that. I don't know. Okay. Well, I thought it was a great idea if that's what you had done. Like I say, I didn't know the answer to the question, but I thought I'd ask it anyway.
In fact, I still have an RV.
You like RVing?
Yeah.
my dad will probably kill me for saying this, but he got an RV several years ago. He's a pharmacist, and he bought the RV, and a bunch of his buddies, I think, were going on RV trips, and he had me over to his house to see it, and he gave us a tour, and it was very nice. And we're headed back. He lived in West Memphis, Arkansas, had a pharmacy over there for years, and we're headed back to Memphis, and my wife says, "Well, what'd you think?" And I said, "Oh, it was great. It was lovely." But I said, my dad will wake up one time in that RV. Now, I mean, he's 6'5". He's a big guy. And I said, that bathroom is not Crone sized. And he's going to take one shower in that RV, and that's going to be the end of the RV. And I was right. Maybe more to that story, but they went on one trip and came back, and the RV was gone. So airplanes, cruise ships, and RVs are not necessarily Crone sized.
I enjoyed it. I attended a lot of Super Bowls and playoffs as a result of having that RV, because I got ticket access through my political ties.
Mm-hmm. That's a fun way to go to a ball game.
Yeah.
In an RV. Do any of y'all do you ever run across a guy named Bob Blake?
I
No.
Bob
don't think so.
Bob was a client of mine, his organization, and he is the president emeritus of the University of Alabama Recreational Vehicle Association. He was one of the first guys to organize, like, I think in the old days, maybe a handful of people. And he does that. He goes to all of at one point, they would go to all of the Alabama games, whether they were in Tuscaloosa or somewhere else, in their RV. And to take your phrase, Commissioner, once you get that bug, it's hard to get away from it. The people who do it routinely, I know, love the independence of it and the ability to go and join that community at sporting events.
Right. Yeah.
So what does the Bailey clan like to do for fun other than RV?
Well, personally, I like, if I'm not playing chess or playing my guitar, or I'm in the gym, or I was a martial arts competitor for many, many years. Still love it. Was state champion in judo, multiple Tennessee, Mississippi state champion. I was wrestling team high school, so I like combat sports. I like going to the UFCs, and I can't throw a ball or hit a ball to save my life. I don't have the coordination and talent my dad had as a football player, but I can throw a man blindfolded, no problem.
Do you see the University of Memphis Tiger game last night?
I did not.
Well, the reason I ask is at one point, the South Florida player kind of hooked arms with, I think it was Lester Quinones, and tossed him over his back. It was like a wrestling move, and there was no foul. I couldn't believe there was no foul on that.
I need to see the highlight.
You need to Google that. Commissioner, how about you? How did you? What kind of diversions did you have during your career to help you get from one day to the next?
Well, the same thing I did this morning. I got out of my garage. I've got a net, full cage net for golf. So I golf. I practice in my garage. Got a propane heat out there in the hall when it's cold. And then I'm always out on the golf course on weekends. But that's one of my passions. My other passion is ballroom dancing. I took ballroom lessons at Fred Astaire Studio for 3 years, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So every time a band strikes up, I want to get out and strut and do my ballroom.
Carson, we need to get him on Dancing with the Stars.
Hey, if Buzz Aldrin can do it, he can do it.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. I love the idea of playing golf. I'll make you look good. I'll make you look really good, because I don't play enough. There's the old The old saying that a lawyer that shoots 120 has got no business playing golf. And a lawyer that shoots in the 70s has no business.
You know, Alan, I don't play golf, or I never played basketball and stuff like that, but I studied the golf. To me, I like to study perfectionists. I've read Tiger Woods' book, the biography on him recently, a couple of Michael Jordan's books, and I don't have to appreciate the game to appreciate the talent. And so I'm really fascinated by that. I hated that Tiger had his accident recently, but just to study his protocol every day, his method growing up, how his father influenced him, and what they did, and the discipline that that he endured, and grew to love. You know, that's something to me. So I try to take that approach to my trial work, and just learn to not just be going through the motions and doing what we're taught in law school, but to enjoy it, and to think outside the box, be different. You know, and when I started doing that, I actually haven't lost a trial in 4 years. Once I started taking that attitude, I started winning I'm just coming across the juries different. I'm taking a different approach, thinking outside of the box. And so there's something to be said about how sports athletes, you know, what you can learn from how they approach things. Michael Jordan approached the sport different than everybody else. You know, it just happens. You know?
Yeah, I think discipline is, in our modern society, is underrated. The value of being disciplined and not doing everything that you can do.
Yeah.
And you know, Tom Brady's a good example of that. If you look at his regimen to maintain his body, it's something that probably a lot of people could do, but they just don't have the discipline to do it.
Yeah.
And discipline and persistence will make up for a lack of talent. And if you have talent and you employ those tools, there's really no limit on what you can do.
You know, speaking of which, when I graduated from high school, I was all everything, all Memphis, gridiron great. And in fact, I got a picture with Elvis where he and I were on stage together. He was backstage watching this musical show, and I was being the WDIA that was sponsoring the musical event was presenting me on stage as a gridiron great, all Memphis, at this musical event. And Elvis was backstage watching the show, and that's how he and I at the same spot, and we took a picture together. But in any event, the thing, getting to your point, I wasn't the biggest guy playing football. I only weighed about 190 playing line. But I was in the middle, played nose guard, and I played linebacker. And I dreaded harsh contact. So I developed a method by which I could escape contact by shooting the gap and doing a lot of fancy footwork. And that's what enabled me to succeed. Here again, though, nobody taught me that. It's something I had to learn myself, how to shoot the gap, and timing had to be perfect in terms of my movements being made. And that's how I was known as a quarterback killer. Because every time a quarterback would look up here, and I've been in some situations where they would give a 2-point safety as opposed to punting in high school, because they knew I'd fulfill my getting back, blocking the punt. But here again to your point, in terms of developing, it's more than just brute strength. You know, it's developing a scheme, and mentally, it's a science.
Yes, it
Appreciate
is.
the science.
Right.
Yeah, Tiger Woods changed the game. Tiger Woods got in the gym, started benching 350 pounds. Then all the other pros said, I got to get in the gym. They started lifting weights because they couldn't hit the ball like he could.
Yeah, every now and then someone comes along and as you say, changes the game, changes what the minimum expectations are, changes how you approach it, and then you got to play their game or get left behind. And I think that happens in the law as well.
Absolutely.
You got to change the game. You can't just accept an obstacle. I mean, that's really the story of your career, Commissioner, is there's an obstacle and you don't accept that obstacle. You're going to figure out a way to overcome, adapt and overcome, as the Marines say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you must.
Yes.
And you know,
Yes.
and that reminds me of going back on that Ghana case, Tissy versus Ghana on the deadly force. I didn't, you know, in my community, we had 5 killings within about a year's period, police shootings. And I handled, prior to Ghana, I had handled 2 other cases where there were deadly force used and people fatally. And I took them up to the Court of Appeals and served and lost, and went to and petitioned for certiorari with the Supreme Court and lost. But I didn't give up. And then the Ghana case came along, and the distinction on that case. But here again, though, I didn't give up. I was determined. There was a wrong that I wanted to right it. And every time a cop would kill somebody, I'd get furious, and I'd take the case. You know, I'd go out seeking the case, and so I finally hit on Ghana. But the distinction was, in Ghana, the cop said, I knew he was unarmed, I knew he was no threat, and he was fleeing, and the only reason I shot him is the law allowed me to shoot him, and I knew it'd be a foot race and I'd lose it. But his frankness, and I commend that officer today, his frankness enabled us to have a factual structure where we could prevail. But here again, though, you know, you got to, as you pointed out, Alan, you got to, you know, in order to succeed at anything, you've got to be determined that you're going to do it. You're going to develop a method by which you're going to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
That's good advice. That's good advice. Speaking of persistence, one thing I wanted to mention what has been your role in particularly the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue. And the reason I bring it up is, I'll be honest, as a white Memphian, I passed that statue every day, and I didn't like it, but I really didn't think too much about it. And it was only when I joined the Strickland administration and I started talking to African Americans who amplified for me what I did not know about that statue that I really began not to just see it as kind of a semi-embarrassing relic of past attitudes, but the intimidator that it really was. And you fought that fight when it wasn't fashionable to fight that fight. I remember reading about you in the 80s and in the early 90s arguing against that statue. Could you tell our listeners what was it about that statue historically that was such a, not just offensive? People say, oh, well, you're offended by it. It wasn't just that you were offended by it, but tell us why that statue was needed to come down. Well,
as you and so many others, I passed those statutes and lived around the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue in my neighborhood as a child, and never even gave it a second thought. It was just something that we lived with. And I was in the Morgan Keegan building. My law practice was there. I forgot what I believe it was Morgan Keegan at the time I was in there on Front Street.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And Jefferson, and I passed that Jefferson Davis statue 100 times, and I just, you know, took it as part of the landscape. Offensive, as you did, Alan, but it was part of the landscape. And that was, I don't know whether you recall the Tyson Holyfield fight. And it brought to Memphis a New York lawyer who was chasing a promoter to get him served. And he knew that promoter would be at ringside, the judgment on him. And he knew he'd be at ringside. So he needed local counsel so he could get him served. So he hired me, and he was living at the Peabody. I mean, staying at the Peabody, of course. And one day we were walking from the Morgan Keegan building, walking back over to the Peabody on Front Street. And this New York lawyer, Jewish lawyer, looked over at that statue and he said, Jefferson Davis, ha ha ha, only in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was so offended that it was like taking a plank and slapping me in the face with it. I was so offended. So I said, that incentivized me to get busy and do something about that. And I got started. I huddled together December Gray and some other folks.
Gail Rose.
Gail Rose, who was very instrumental in helping, and G.A. Hardaway, and we all, and the lawyer who's dead now, I can't think of his name. He's very feisty, fighter for just cause. Got hit in an automobile accident, but Richard Fields. So a group of us congregated and we would put together a committee. And we got Al Sharpton here to speak and to help us with the rally. And that's what got it started. That New York lawyer coming here and scornfully laughing at us.
Well, I always said, well, anyway, that was one of the achievements of the first term of the Strickland administration that I was involved in. I can't take any credit for it. I had a football coach tell me, Commissioner, if you can't make the tackle, at least stand by the pile. And I was standing by the pile. I was helping out with that. Bruce McMillan and Doug McGowan and you and Jim Strickland and a number of other people did the heavy lifting on that. And, we, in the mayor's office, we heard from so many people. And the one I'll never forget was an old gentleman. I don't know how old he was, but he sounded, very feeble. And he called the mayor, and I just happened to be in the office when the call came through. And he said, Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank you for listening to us. And this is the first time the government has cared about what we say. And I don't think that was just African Americans. I think that was, there's certain people that are powerless and they often don't get their say. And yes. I was proud that no matter what side you fall down on that statue issue, that was not taken down for the powerful. That was taken down for the powerless. And I was just proud to be a part of it. And I was really proud that you stood with Mayor Strickland on that and that we were able to get that done. And I just wanted to, Commissioner, I just wanted to thank you for all the work you did behind the scenes in making that a reality.
Well, during that time when we first staged the protest efforts to rid the city of those statues, and we were rebuffed by some city officials, names whom I won't call, to my amazement, who thought that we ought to be doing other things, that had no significance. And they didn't see the wisdom of it. So
that's right.
But so AC saw some wisdom in it, but he didn't make the move he should have made on it. He did make some efforts to keep them from enhancing it by dropping name monuments out there in the park. He forbade that. Had one of them removed. They did drop one down there. The Sons of the Confederacy dropped a name monument down at Nathan Bedford Forest Park, and AC had a truck to go down there and move it, but Strickland really stepped up to the plate, and that was huge. And history now bears him out.
Yeah, and and I thought the great thing about it is he did it in a very Strickland-esque way, which was he went through all the right channels. He found a legal way to get it done, and I think the rule of law is important. And then when the law doesn't, let you do what's right, you figure out a way to make the law do what's right. But it was a great event. I've got a picture in my office of the crane taking the statue off, and it's important to me that it's visible.
Appreciate you sharing that.
But it really was, words can't express how monumental that was, and what a huge gesture. He could have taken many attitudes about that. He could have said, well, like some of the others did. And he didn't have to put that out as a priority and tackle it. He could have dodged it with many excuses. Could have ignored it. Nobody was pressing him to move right on it except, he stepped up to the plate on that one.
Well, I think the timing with the 50th
and with modesty and grace,
Yes. Well,
I mention something about that?
Sure.
I think the problem is people aren't generally students of history, and they don't have the empathy needed sometimes to have the vision. And my father Walter has always been a big student of history, World War II, and went to Germany, and so always got to see the World War II tapes in our house. Remember that the Betamax tapes?
You'll do it on YouTube now.
And I was in international affairs. That was my concentration in school, and so I'd been studying Rwanda and Croatia, and some of these other regimes, Tokugawa over Japan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in no regime, even in the fall of the Soviet Union, you can't go find statues of Vladimir Lenin. They're still up. If you went to Boston today and said, "Hey, let's put a statue of General Cornwallis in the middle of Boston, in the middle of the park, so that we can have some history show." That's history. It's heritage. The Bostonians will run you out of Boston. I mean, it's the idea that is ludicrous, and people weren't appreciating that it was a different government. It doesn't belong here anymore, and we don't need a reminder of it. It belongs in the museum. That's it. I mean, that's most African Americans and Jews and people who empathize with it are saying. They weren't saying erase history. They were always being accused. You want to erase history? No, put it in its proper perspective. Put it in a museum. Same with Nazi Germany. Same with I think. Even in Iraq, when the Iraqi regime, what's the first thing you see? They pull down the statues. You see mobs of people with ropes yanking the statues and stomping on the statues because they're saying this is no longer going to be we don't want this memory here. It belongs somewhere else. And so I think that's what people didn't get. The symbols mean something.
That's right. And I said two things about it. One is you lose a war, you don't get a statue. That's the rule. You lose the war, you don't get a statue, and you don't get an equine statue, an equestrian statue. Seriously, equestrian statues were for victors.
Yes.
And a lot of people said, probably rightly, I'm not here to bash. I'm not here to bash anybody, but a lot of people said, well, in his later years, Nathan Bedford Forrest did this, that, and the other, and he helped Black students, and he reformed himself. And my response always was, he's up there with a sword on a horse in a uniform. He's not up there next to an African-American child helping him into school. I mean, if you want to put up that kind of statue, that's fine.
Right.
But anyway, it's hard to do. It's very hard to do. It's hard to admit that we have things in our past that we aren't proud of, or that we don't want to face. And again, I was on the city council briefly, and I got death threats, very beautifully written 19th century kind of prose death threats from pro-Confederates, and for my votes on the statue and other things. And I remember at that time, as people would say, well, I wasn't alive during the Civil War. My parents weren't here. it occurred to me one day that I don't think a crone, we've been in Memphis since 1855. I don't remember a crone standing up against segregation. I don't remember a crone standing up against Jim Crow or against other restrictions of rights. So I felt like it was my job to stand up, and I don't want to meddle. I don't want, but I just thought it was the right thing to do. To, as you say, Taurus, to show that empathy and say, look, we're all Memphians. Let's find symbols that can unite us together, not symbols that even divide us even remotely, because there are too many communities out there, Birmingham and Atlanta and Chicago and Dallas, who are trying to recruit our jobs away, trying to do better than us. And we got to be united if we're going to compete in a global marketplace. And we can't be squabbling over those kinds of issues. We got to put that in the past and move forward. And the only way we're going to move forward as a community is if we each show the other, to the extent that we're divided, that, hey, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's figure out how to move on this together and not just marginalize each other. And that's what I thought that's what that statue symbolized more than anything else, was a division that we didn't need. And I'm sure there's some people listening to this podcast who think that's right. There are probably other people who think that's wrong. And if that's the case, I'm sorry we disagree on that, but we're just going to have to disagree on that one.
Well, no question that those statues were gestures of defiance.
Yeah. It was facing Union Avenue, defiance of the Union. That was purposely placed in that direction.
And you would go, and right now, some of these small town southern, you go to these small southern towns where they have the square, and they got these Confederate statues in the square. And of course, the whole notion is you didn't win the war, and it's a gesture of defiance. That's what it is. Symbolizes it. And always, when I go to small towns and see those statues, those monuments, I get goose pimples. Not because of fright, but just what they symbolize to me in that town.
Well, let's end on a positive note. Let's look to the future. I'll start with you, Commissioner. What do you think is, as hopefully we're coming out of this pandemic and looking for a future, what do you see on the horizon for you and for the city of Memphis in general?
Well, I see a lot of progress, development, opportunities, that is. We're in a wonderful position to prosper. We got fine educational institutions here. We got the presence of Amazon and FedEx, of course, and other institutions of that sort developing. And then in your market, the financial sector is rapidly expanding and growing to assist and aid in the financial pictures of this community. So I see us moving right along, and racially we seem to, racially, it seems to me that we have matured. We've come a long ways. And we're continuing to mature.
Yes. Taurus, how about you?
I couldn't say it any better, to be honest. I think there's been a drastic change. I remember watching the news when my father's case, Tennessee versus Garner, was a hot topic, and police were making excuses for themselves in the mid '80s. Why they felt they deserved to be able to shoot somebody down. And I remember that. I remember specifically one officer saying, "Well, we're not track stars." And I never forgot that. In fact, when I had to study the case in law school, I was seeing that on the news in my class. But I'm saying that to say that the attitudinal improvement, that would be an officer, the average officer today, if you stopped them and asked them about, they would look at you cross-eyed and say, "You must be from another planet. You can just gun people down like," just that evolution alone in the racial climate, and I've seen so many. The overall pride and attitude of Memphis, even since I've been home in the last 20 years, is tremendously different. The pride in Memphis, it's not as pessimistic as it used to be. You know, people are appreciating what we have, and part of that, I think, also is the small business growth. We're seeing the expansion of small businesses on a large scale. A lot of places like Nashville are growing up in big buildings, but we're seeing a spreading of small businesses and people supporting those businesses, especially since social media has gotten bigger. It helps a lot. And that helps a lot of pride in watching community businesses grow.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say what you said about all of that, in particular about the police, because I've got a lot of friends in the police department, starting with Director Rollins and coming all the way down. And one thing that I was impressed with when I was in the city government is Memphis doesn't have, in the recent years, I'd say the last 10 or 20 years, we've had some unfortunate incidents, but they've been the outliers. And I think we've got and I think the secret is part of what Memphians face these demons and hopefully defeat them more directly than I think in a lot of places for a lot of reasons. And then the other is, I think we have a well-trained police force. I think if you look at around the country, a lot of these incidents happen, I'm convinced, because the police force is not adequately trained. And then we have a well-integrated police force. It's a diverse police force, men, women, blacks, whites, Hispanics. And to be fair, the city, before Mayor Strickland came in, made a conscious effort to do that.
Yeah.
And of course, the Strickland administration has continued that. So we've got a lot to be thankful for in Memphis.
Yeah, it definitely shows.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time. I appreciate I could go on for another hour or so, and then maybe after the COVID is lifted, maybe we can get an adult beverage and share some more stories. But
love to.
I enjoyed talking with you. You're two of my favorite lawyers.
I appreciate it, Alan. It's always good to talk to you. Maybe we can do that in his RV.
That's
On my boat.
There you go.
On the boat.
That sounds good. So this is all for this episode of Ask Alan. This is Alan Crone. If you enjoyed this, please share it on social media or share it via email. Contact us at Ask Alan and ask us a question or suggest a new guest. For this episode of Ask Alan, that's all. I'm going to go get some justice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.